Hello, everybody out there tuning in through either Facebook, YouTube, or LinkedIn. Welcome to the next conversation that we're having as part of our inaugural Empowerthon. Now, what's Empowerthon? It's a 5-week marathon of empowerment specifically geared toward parents and kids, the kids being in the age range usually between 10 and 20. And then what's Parent Tween Foundation? It's the nonprofit charitable leg of the Parent Tween Connection. If you don't know what Parent Tween Connection is, well, we're where parents go when they don't know where to go. We focus on connecting families to the professionals who can support them. And the Parent Tween Foundation helps to bridge the financial gap that so frequently exists between families' budgets and the help that the families need. So the next conversation we're having today is with Denise Kleinman, who is the founder of Tap Intuition. So Denise, first and foremost, thank you so much for your time as we host this inaugural event.
Happy to be here and glad to be of service.
And I know that people are going to get some really good value out of this. So what I'm going to say to our listeners is, yes, this is a fundraiser. So that means there's going to be a shameless plug to say, hey, if you get good information out of this, we're going to ask you to follow the link in the description, which will take you to Denise's page where you can say thank you by making a donation. But what are we focusing on today? Actually, before I go there, if you have questions as we chat, because we are streaming live, come on over to our Facebook group and join us. That's where we will be fielding any questions or commentary as we go. So when I put out the call for speakers, and I saw Denise's interest come in where she was talking about tapping. Now, I've known about tapping for a very, very, very long time, but it never made a whole lot of sense to me. But I'm getting to know more and more and more people who are practicing it and utilizing it to manage stress. And when Denise said, hey, I want to talk specifically about the crazy that comes up or the anxiety, the doubt, the frustration that comes up for parents when their kids start navigating into middle school, that is such a huge transition. And then it just feels like it's straight on till morning after that, doesn't it?
It doesn't really slow down.
So, Denise, why don't we start there? I know you're a parent, you've been through this. What are some of the biggest things that come up for parents in terms of their own doubt and anxiety as parents, particularly in this middle school timeframe?
Sure. So I think that doubt and anxiety crop up during this time period for several reasons. One is that this is a brand new phase. We've spent the first 9-10 years more or less taking care of everything for our kids. And now all of a sudden they have stronger opinions about things. They don't want to be hanging out with us all the time. And I think we really need to acknowledge that we're no longer in control of their lives. And that's really the way it needs to be and should be if we want them to become resilient adults, right? Like they actually need to be making mistakes in a safe way, right? So that they learn these lessons, before they're adults. And the truth is, I think that a lot of times we need to acknowledge that there is some grief associated with saying goodbye to that period of their childhood, particularly depending on how many children you have. You might be only going through it once, or if you have, multiple children. I actually have 3 kids in that age. I have an almost 10-year-old and an almost 20-year-old. So I'm coming up on my last one, right? And rounding that corner of I don't have a little kid anymore. So to really, just sit with that and to just be kind to ourselves and say, wow, you know what? Like this has been a big part of my life and it's going to change and it's going to be different. The other thing is that nobody really ever talks about middle school like it was the best years of their life, right? So
middle school was the best, right? Said no one ever.
Well, there's a few people out there, but we're carrying forward potentially a lot of baggage from what we went through. Because we all went through it. We all know the awkwardness. We all know the changing bodies. The peer pressure starts ramping up. School starts getting harder. So there are a lot more stressors on kids, as they're going through this. And so it's really important for us to recognize what's our stuff and what's the kids' stuff, right? And so, recognizing when your child comes home and if they say something like they were left out of a party or they weren't invited to something or whatever it is, if we seize up right away, like we might want to pay attention to that and say, oh, wait a second, like this happens. This is actually a normal part of growing up. Maybe this is something that I'm more sensitive to, and I just need to step back and and take a
Right.
few breaths, right?
Right.
And then of course social media. We didn't have social media growing up, and I think it's very easy to worry about our children
Hmm.
because any mistakes they do make or poor choices could potentially be spread far and wide. And that's a really scary thing. And so that's incredibly legitimate. But again, worry is often us living too far into the future, right? So the
Hmm.
more that we can stay present with what is and what the reality is of the moment. Obviously, if something like that happens to your child, then yes, it absolutely needs to be handled.
For
But
sure.
we need to like watch that runaway train in our minds,
Hmm.
and not head all the way to the train crash at the end when that may not ever happen.
Right. Well, and I'm really glad that you mentioned that because we're in our second week as you and I are having this conversation. We're in our second week of conversations with an array of amazing professionals. And one of the themes that has come up in multiple conversations where we're addressing different topics has been that for the adults, we need to be very conscious and cognizant of what's ours versus what's theirs. And as much as possible, not to foist our fears, our concerns, our triggers, our traumas upon them.
Right, absolutely. And the truth is, a lot of parenting books kind of gloss over the how of how to do that, right?
Right.
It's like it's real easy to just say, "Oh, just count to 10," and it's like, well, it doesn't all go away. I
Right.
mean, maybe a little more centered, and that's good because you want to really only interact with your kids when you're centered, if possible. But if you were bullied or there was some significant trauma in your past, that's definitely something that needs to be tended to.
Hmm.
And that is one of the reasons why I like EFT because it's very targeted, and
Hmm.
can get into those specific memories and help clear them.
That's
Uh,
awesome.
yeah.
So, okay, so we've talked about like why this is a big shift. And what I've also observed, I know you had said before we actually popped live that as a mom, because of the spread of your kiddos, age wise, that you kind of like been in and out of the workforce, and whatnot. And one of the things that I've observed now, full disclosure for anyone who's watching, I'm actually not a mom, so I'm the connector of the community, but my husband and I have not gone down the path of having children, and so I can only speak from observation of other moms, but also my experience as the teenager. But so many women that I've seen over the years who are in a situation where stay-at-home mom is their primary focus, or even if they're still working, I see many women still identify primarily as mom and then as the professional. That on top of this, like you said, it's a new phase of life. It's not just a matter of adjusting and grieving, but in many ways, for a lot of women I've seen, it's a redefinition of who they are because their identity is suddenly shifting because they're not the one who is fully responsible for all the things. And it can feel very much like your kids are kicking you in the gut and pushing you away. And you're like, but what happened to my sweet, kind little child?
Right.
There's a
Yeah,
big piece of that.
right. And I think in order to get to that place of enjoying your child, you're enjoying your tween and your teen,
Mhm.
and honestly, like I guess my remedy to the sources of the anxiety. I mean, my personal parenting philosophy is twofold. One is that the connection with your child is the absolute paramount.
Mhm.
And staying connected to them is challenging when they're pushing you away. There's no
Mhm.
doubt about it. And so
Abs
you're right. Like women do have this opportunity. We have more time, we have more freedom to develop our own interests, right? And so as much as possible, if we can learn to not take that rejection personally from our,
Personally. Yep.
then we have
And
then
we
we have
actually
room to grow, right?
right, we had a conversation about that very thing with, Sonali Vongchusari, actually from Thailand last evening, so that as part of a powerthon, so that's a very clearly related but, separate conversation. So, establishing how challenging this is and why it's challenging, one of the things you wanted to comment on is the number one thing that a parent can do to support their teens in this process.
So I honestly think that it's about building trust. It's about, renegotiating this relationship you have, where you're letting them know what your parameters of safety look like, whether that's a curfew or, where they're hanging out after school. You're still involved in those decisions, but it's really, really important that you are letting them make some of those choices within those parameters, right? Because I honestly think that the again, I mean, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but the stronger the relationship you have with them, even if it doesn't look like it to you, like it's so funny.
Mhm.
My son's band director is always saying things like to the parents, they're never going to say it, but trust me, like they really do want you here. It really matters to them that you're here. I think that the more that you can maintain and foster that relationship, the less you will worry because you can trust that if they get in over their head, they're gonna feel comfortable enough letting you know.
For sure.
And that's what
Okay, so then
you don't need
what
to know everything they're doing, but if they get in over their head, you wanna make sure that they're gonna let you in on that.
for sure. So then with that as a baseline, I know a lot of folks are like, I yes, I know how again, how do I do it, right?
Right,
And
right.
so it seems like the second point that you wanted to make about the relationship between behavior and communication could be a piece of that.
Well, I feel that all behavior is communication, honestly.
Mm, mhm,
So if there's a behavior that you're seeing that you don't like, that's maybe your child letting you know something, right?
mhm,
If their grades are going down, maybe they don't feel like they can tell you, gosh, this is really hard. Or, in elementary school, like school was so easy. And now I'm in with all these other kids who are really smart and I don't feel that
mhm,
special anymore. Like that might be
mhm,
the subtext, right? Um,
mhm,
and so there are these access points where we can have those conversations rather than getting upset about the bad grades, right?
mhm.
Like asking questions about what's really going on here, and providing that opening.
Got it. That makes me think of a conversation I had with a parent a few years ago, and I referenced this in another conversation I had it with Empowerthon. Unfortunately, she lost one of her kiddos to suicide,
Mm,
and sometime later, another kiddo all of a sudden was struggling in math, but it was far enough removed from his brother's passing that the connection wasn't immediately apparent. And it was a surprise because the surviving kiddo had always been very good in math. And all of a sudden he's taking this higher level math class. And all of a sudden it was just like things were tanking. And long story short, ultimately, after trying to work with the teacher and craft this plan and that plan and the other plan that just weren't working for him, the mom finally had an opportunity to say, what else is going on here? And what finally came up was that the day that they had learned an incredibly foundational skill, or the couple of days or whatever that they had learned this base level skill with whatever it was, he was like checked out or he wasn't there or something happened so that at least mentally he wasn't with the teacher. He didn't learn that skill. And then it just became this horrid snowball effect.
mhm.
And so I like your point of like, okay, what's going on? What else? What else? What else?
Need isn't being met, I think is the question.
Right.
Might not be able to ask that directly, but that needs to be what's in the back of our mind, right? We
Well,
have
and
to
maybe,
like
but maybe you can. Like, what do you need?
well, yeah,
And
depends
not that you're
on
gonna get a straight
the
answer, but like maybe.
like, definitely.
um, so then how does that, do you think, fit in back to that point of having a connection, like strengthening the connection?
I'm sorry, how does which part fit in?
Right, recognizing that the behavior is the communication of an unmet need. Put that together for us.
Related to the connection is that you, um, have your child's best interests in heart, right? And we always want to assume the best from our kids, like assume that they're doing the best that they can. Um, and if they're not, like if it's a grade thing, for example, like a kid
Right.
who always did really well and all of a sudden they're not because they want to prove something to us. I think that's the only way back, right? Like I think that if we get upset and start and have a big fight about it, that's only going to, drive that wedge further and create more distance, right? And then we're gonna have to play catch up.
Well,
Um, yeah.
and I was gonna say it's interesting that you say like we'd like to assume that they're always doing their best, right?
Yeah,
And yet you
right.
find that that's the reality. Is that how we engage in those conversations? Because I think
Parent?
sometimes, yeah,
No.
right? Well, because that's what I was thinking. Because like we had a conversation earlier today with a woman, Carrie Collar, and we were talking about ADHD and impulsivity.
Mhm.
And she herself deals with impulsivity. And she's like, if I could count the number of times that my mother looked at me and said, "What were you thinking?"
Right.
Like, what made you think that was a good idea? What I'm thinking now in relation to our conversation is the intimation is you know better, meaning I'm assuming you didn't do your best in the moment.
Right. Well, sure, and I think that's gonna happen. None of us is perfect, right? I mean, we're
Right.
speaking in an ideal world here, and I think that, but that's kind of where the EFT comes in, right? And it doesn't have to be EFT, but whatever your practices of staying
Mhm.
centered, so that you can have that filter, so that you're not asking that question. I mean, trust me, my kids, I don't know exactly what my face looks like when I say certain things to them, but it clearly looks a certain way because they all kind of make fun of me for it. So it's tough to hide, right? Like
Uh-huh.
you can be speaking the right words, the words like the textbook words, right? But your body language can betray you a little bit.
Mhm. Mhm.
So look, none of us ever hits this out of the park every single time. Um,
Right.
and I think kids know that. Like, look, life is messy. And it's okay. I
Mhm.
don't think we need to pretend that it isn't. And we're not all, yogis who are meditating all the time either, right? Like life happens.
It
Um,
does.
so, but what I have found with my EFT practice is that it helps raise that emotional foundation. Okay. So
Right.
it helps reduce kind of the irritability, like the
Mhm.
little things. It increases my patience. I do actually have a lot more space to listen to what they're saying and then step back and not react. Right. So we're trying to increase the space between the match and the flame, basically.
Right.
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 And so I would love to show you a
Mhm.
little exercise that
Absolutely.
people can use, whether or not you've ever tapped before or not. We'll do a full-fledged demo after that, but this will just sort of teach everybody the points.
Mhm.
And we call this EFT first aid. So
Okay.
basically what we're going to do is we're going to tap and breathe. So we're going to touch every point. So the first one is at the very top of the head. So go ahead and do this with me. Take a breath at each point. So it's the top of the head, and then we're going to do the eyebrow point, which is right where your eyebrow meets the bridge of your nose, and just take a breath. And then to the side of the eye, on the bone, under the eye, on the bone, under the nose, on the chin, where you have a crease here, collarbone point, which is a little bit down from where your collarbone meets your sternum.
Like here-ish.
Yeah, like about a 1 inch diagonally down from that
Got it. Yep.
corner. And then the last point that we normally use is about 4 inches down. You can't really see because I'm on the camera, but 4 inches below your armpit, which is normally where a bra strap is for a woman.
Okay.
So that's something you can do. It's just called tap and breathe. So if you don't remember the points, you can Google it. It's real easy to find a tapping chart. Um, and it just brings
So
stress.
does it matter like which side we do it on? Because like on that one,
You can do both sides. Like up here, if you want to do both sides, you can. But nope, doesn't really matter.
okay.
Um, so EFT, is based on the premise that we hold memories in the body,
Mhm.
and so it's particularly when we have an event that's a fight or freeze response,
Mhm.
and we
Mhm.
don't have time to deal with whatever's going on in the moment. Our body says, "Oh, that's okay. We'll take care of that for you. We're going to stick that in your shoulder or in your gut or
Mhm.
wherever." So, tapping these points, what it does is it helps calm down the amygdala, which is the body's alarm system. It's like the body
Mhm.
fire alarm, and just says, okay, it's okay. There's really no fire. It's really okay. I don't need to do that. And so it kind of works, in tandem with the hippocampus, which is where our memories are stored. So we reduce the trigger. We don't have the emotional response anymore after we've tapped on these issues. But we obviously can still remember what happened. So, I mean, that's
Mhm.
kind of like the basic science behind it.
Awesome. And can you actually, never mind. You drive. Where
Yeah.
are we going?
Like I said, I'd love to run us through maybe a 5-minute little tapping demo.
Sure.
And so it's going to be pretty basic to just, it'll sort of address a lot of the themes that we've discussed today.
Mhm.
And I would just say if anybody does feel overwhelmed, to just take responsibility for yourself and, pause and step
Take
away.
a break.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, take a break. And also if you don't feel like the things we're tapping on are really your issues, like it's okay, don't worry about it. There's something called borrowed benefits. So even if these wouldn't necessarily be the exact words that you would use, you can still benefit from it.
Mhm.
So what we like to do is if you think about your level of doubt and anxiety around your kids, is to give it a number from 0 to 10, with 0 being not at all and 10 being the worst ever. And I would just invite everyone listening to write down their number or just keep it in mind.
Mhm.
And also to think about where that might be in your body. And to kind of just, if you need to close your eyes for a minute, just kind of tune in and think about, is there a part of your body that's feeling tense right now? There's no right or wrong answer here. If nothing comes up, don't worry about it. But if something does, I mean, lots of times people feel things in their stomachs, in their chest, or their throat might feel tight, but it really can be anything.
Mhm.
And to kind of tune into that part of the body as well. And what we're going to do is we're going to start on the side of the hand. So this is the only other point we're going to use today besides the ones I've already shown you.
Can you lift it up a little bit so we can
Oh yeah,
see?
sorry. And Clarissa, so if you are game to work with me, we'll have you you'll repeat what I say.
Okay.
Okay? Even though I have this doubt and anxiety,
Even though I have this doubt and anxiety,
I accept myself and how I feel.
I accept myself and how I feel.
Even though my child triggers me pretty regularly,
Even though my child triggers me pretty regularly,
which makes me doubt my parenting,
which makes me doubt my parenting,
I can accept myself anyway.
I can accept myself anyway.
Even though parenting is challenging and stressful,
Even though parenting is challenging and stressful,
I deeply and completely accept myself.
I deeply and completely accept myself.
So now we're going to go to the top of the head and we're just kind of keep going around. My child isn't a little kid anymore.
My child isn't a little kid anymore.
It's hard to watch them grow up sometimes.
It's hard to watch them grow up sometimes.
I miss the days when I was their entire world,
I miss the days where I was their entire world,
when they listened to everything I said.
when they listened to everything I said.
Those days are in the past,
Those days are in the past.
and I feel a little sad about that.
And I feel a little sad about that.
I'm not sure they know enough to be safe.
I'm not sure they know enough to be safe.
It's hard to watch them make mistakes.
It's hard to watch them make mistakes.
It even makes me cringe sometimes.
It even makes me cringe sometimes.
It probably reminds me of when I was their age,
It probably reminds me of when I was their age,
feeling awkward,
feeling awkward,
worried about fitting in,
worried about fitting in,
what others thought of me,
and what others thought of me,
feeling weird about the changes in my body.
feeling weird about the changes in my body.
Even though kids develop and mature at different rates,
Even though kids develop and mature at different rates,
mine may be ahead of their peers in some ways
mine may be ahead of their peers in some ways
and behind in others.
and behind in others.
And then there's social media.
And then there's social media.
It's a little scary.
It's a little scary.
They're comparing themselves to each other constantly.
They're comparing themselves to each other constantly.
And honestly, I sometimes have no idea what they're doing online.
And honestly, I sometimes have no idea what they're doing online.
I'm worried they're getting in over their heads.
I'm worried they're getting in over their heads.
And I'm tired of policing their screens.
And I'm tired of policing their screens.
It feels impossible to enforce.
It feels impossible to enforce.
And I'm worried that I'm messing my kid up.
And I'm worried that I'm messing my kid up.
Are they going to be okay
Are they going to be okay
in this scary, complex world?
in this scary, complex world?
Dealing with all the heavy issues their generation is inheriting.
Dealing with all the heavy issues their generation is inheriting.
The truth is, this stage of life is temporary.
The truth is, this stage of life is temporary.
It's not going to last forever.
It's not going to last forever.
I survived it.
I survived it.
And they probably will too.
And they probably will too.
What can I do to support them during this time?
What can I do to support them during this time?
How can I find the balance of being available?
How can I find the balance of being available
without encroaching on their privacy?
Without encroaching on their privacy?
How can I trust my parenting skills in this topsy-turvy world?
How can I trust my parenting skills in this topsy-turvy world?
How do I maintain the connection with them at this critical time?
How do I maintain my connection with them at this critical time?
What does my child most need from me right now?
What does my child most need from me right now?
How can I best express my love for them?
How can I best express my love for them?
And what conversation can I have with them that shows them I see them for who they are?
And what conversation can I have with them that shows them that I see them for who they are?
Okay, so just take a deep breath. How did that feel? I mean, I know you don't have kids, but
I was going to say it's interesting because I don't have that I just can't tap into that, you know?
Yeah.
But it was
yeah. I mean, honestly, I feel I truly believe that we have the answers inside of us.
Mm-hmm.
And so, so those questions that I was posing at the end, if any of those resonate with any listeners, just spend a little time sitting with that or journaling on it, and just kind of listen to what comes up.
Well, and I can say again, not that I can, even though I can't tap into that particular aspect, there's another topic, and I'm like, okay, at the very least, I wasn't thinking about the thing that was stressing me out for whatever that duration was. And that in and of itself helps to calm the nervous system down and brings us a little bit closer back to neutral, so that we can think a little bit more clearly about it. Because between the tapping, and by the way, if you are listening to this on the podcast and you didn't see each of those phrases, we tapped one spot, repeatedly in that pattern that she already described to us. So just tap as you say a phrase and then move through that same process. What did we do? 4 or 5 times, I think, with those statements. Mm-hmm. So, but there's definitely a calming aspect to it.
Yeah, you're putting a pause on things. Mm-hmm. And I agree. I think that the tapping, it gives you something to do too, right?
Right.
If you're not a meditator, if the deep breaths aren't enough, it really does. Like I said, these are like on-off switches for our nervous system. So it really, if you don't remember anything else from this video, but you remember some of these points, not even all of them, just start tapping on them. Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned that some of those statements or questions may not have been as immediately pertinent depending on the circumstance. Do you have any recommendations of how folks can, well, I guess the answer is it lies inside of you, but like the statements that they need or the questions that they need to ask, is it just like, hey, whatever comes up, just kind of let it out? Or do you have a recommendation of where to start?
So if I were doing this tapping, I would do this tapping if I had, let's say, had a fight with my child. Okay. And I wanted to regroup and reset. Mm-hmm. And so I would, or if they came to me with something that was really upsetting to me, maybe it did remind me of something that happened to me, a bullying incident or something, I might say, I need a couple minutes. This is kind of upsetting me. Like this, like I hear you and this is important to me, but I need a few minutes to go deal with how I'm feeling about this. Mm-hmm. And excuse yourself. And maybe then you would do this tapping, right? And yeah, I would say, I do think lots of times things do bubble up, right? Mm-hmm. Like, oh, they don't need me to fix this right now. They just need me to. Okay. So that might be one. And that's actually one that you can use pretty much all the time if you're not sure. Okay. That one is pretty standard.
Pretty widely applicable. Okay.
And then I would go back and I would say, hey, thank you for allowing me to have that time. I actually feel a lot more centered now, and I really want to be here to support you. And do you have any ideas of what that might look like? I mean, because they might not always know. And it's just a back and forth, right? It's like any other relationship that we have. Is
Mhm.
that we are, again, meeting in the middle more than we used to, right? As kids,
Mhm.
we're
Mhm.
really giving them our full attention and our full respect, and just honoring the pain that they may be going through, and or the
Right.
confusion, whatever it is.
And the show.
And
Right.
that goes a
Absolutely.
long way. That really does go a long way. Our kids, wanting to problem solve is just so innate in us, and
Mhm.
really our kids, that's not necessarily what they want. They might, and we can offer, or we could say, "Hey, um, even in a couple days, if you want my ideas for how you think I would handle this, I'd be happy to talk to you about that," right?
Right.
Really let them take the lead.
Awesome. Denise, thank you so much. I know that there's going to be some folks who are really going to benefit from the short demo, and just again understandings of staying calm, staying focused, because you can't connect when you're in that place of crazy or upset. Um, so as I promised everyone listening, here's the shameless plug. I told you it was coming. If you found value here and you got some good aha moments, or you've now got another tangible strategy to help you calm down when things go a little bit not so calm, the link to donate through Denise's, or as a thank you to Denise, is in the descriptions of all of the conversations, no matter where you're tuning in. And we actually do have a little bit of a friendly competition going on amongst our speakers. Basically, if Denise is the fundraisingist, as I'm now calling it, speaker for Empowerathon, we will donate 20% of whatever all of her listeners donate to Parent Tween Foundation. And we asked her to name a nonprofit, family focused organization of her choice. And the one that she identified is the Parents Climate Community there in Austin, Texas. And so whatever her grand total is, if she's the fundraisingist, we will donate 20% of that to the Parents Climate Community. So can you tell us a little bit about them?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we are a volunteer-based parent-run organization, and we work to create meaningful activities related to the climate for families, for kids and families. And so that involves some advocacy, some education. Right now, we hired an intern to create a film about a highway expansion that's happening right now. So it's really finding the voices of the youth and caregivers in the climate change conversation.
That's awesome. That's the first one that anyone has mentioned that's relative to climate change. So make sure all of our listeners that you let all of our climate change advocates know that they need to tune in, or at the very least, I mean, they need to tune in to get the information from Denise, but then as a thank you, make a donation as well, so that it will also help Parents Climate Community. I lost it for a second. So fantastic. Well, Denise, thank you so much. I appreciate your time, and everybody listening, have a great day.
Thank you. My pleasure.